It is May 10th, 1954, in Dayton, Ohio, and inside a conference hall at the Institute of Radio Engineers, speaker after speaker has taken the podium to explain why silicon transistors are years away from reality. The melting point is too high, the material is too reactive. Attendees are stifling yawns when a quiet physicist from a Dallas oil exploration company nobody has heard of steps up to give his talk. His name is Gordon Teal, and he works for a firm called Texas Instruments. He says calmly, "Contrary to what my colleagues have told you about the bleak prospects for silicon transistors, I happen to have a few of them here in my pocket." Then he reaches into his jacket and pulls them out. Working silicon transistors, already in production. The room falls silent. The company behind Gordon Teal did not start in electronics. It started listening to the ground for oil, and what happened between those two facts is one of the strangest transformation stories in American technology. You are watching American Electronics and Tech, where we take apart the companies that built the electronic world, down to the circuit board and the engineer who designed it. If this is your kind of story, subscribe and hit like, because the company that invented the microchip started by bouncing sound waves off rocks, and the road from there to here is just as improbable as it sounds. In 1930, a physicist named J. Clarence Karcher and an engineer named Eugene McDermott founded Geophysical Service in Dallas, Texas. Their business was reflection seismology, bouncing sound waves off underground rock to map where the oil was. An explorer named Everett Lee DeGolyer backed the venture with $100,000, but the oil business was erratic, and by the late 1930s, the company had reorganized, with the geophysical work spun into a subsidiary called GSI. On December 6, 1941, the day before Pearl Harbor, 4 GSI employees, McDermott, J. Eric Johnson, Cecil H. Green, and H. Bates Peacock, purchased the subsidiary. Within months, GSI was building electronics for the Navy and the Army Signal Corps. The rugged casings they had designed to protect oil detection equipment turned out to be exactly what the military needed for radar and submarine warfare. The war rewired the company's DNA, and in November 1945, a young naval officer named Patrick Haggerty, a summa cum laude engineering graduate from Marquette University, walked through the door. Haggerty looked at GSI's electronics contracts and saw something nobody else in Dallas saw. The real business was not finding oil. It was the instruments they had built to find it. In 1951, the company renamed itself Texas Instruments. Revenue stood at roughly $20 million. In the world of American electronics, TI was invisible, but Haggerty had a plan. In 1952, he lured a crystal physicist named Gordon Teal away from Bell Laboratories, where Teal had perfected the technique for growing high-purity semiconductor crystals. Bell Labs had invented the transistor in 1947, but transistors were made of germanium, a material with frustrating limits. Silicon could operate at far higher temperatures, but no one had purified it well enough. Teal was homesick for Texas, and Haggerty offered him the chance to build TI's central research laboratories from scratch. What almost nobody knows is that a Bell Labs chemist named Morris Tannenbaum fabricated a working silicon transistor in January 1954, 3 months before Teal's team. But Bell Labs judged the process unattractive for production. Honest history holds both facts. Tannenbaum built the first one, but Teal and chemist Willis Adcock built the first one anyone could buy. They tested it on April 14, 1954. 4 weeks later, Teal stood in Dayton with the devices in his pocket. But Haggerty wanted the transistor in every American living room. In May 1954, TI designed a prototype transistor radio and went looking for a manufacturer. RCA said no. Philco said no. Emerson said no. Every major radio company passed. The only firm that said yes was a small Indianapolis outfit called the Regency Division of IDEA. On October 18, 1954, the Regency TR-1 was announced, and by November, it was on sale for $49.95, roughly $550 today. The sound quality was, by Consumer Reports' verdict, adequate for speech and unsatisfactory for music. It did not matter. About 150,000 units sold because the radio fit in a shirt pocket and introduced the word transistor into the American vocabulary. Teenagers took rock and roll to the beach. T.I.'s revenue grew from $20 million to $92 million across the decade. But the transistor radio was the prelude. The main act was about to arrive, built by an engineer who was not allowed to take a vacation. In the summer of 1958, an electrical engineer from Great Bend, Kansas, named Jack Kilby, joined Texas Instruments. He had spent years thinking about the problem of wiring. Computers of the era required miles of hand-soldered connections between individual transistors, resistors, and capacitors, and the failure rate was enormous. Kilby believed that if every component could be made from the same block of material, the connections could be miniaturized and the wiring problem would vanish. He arrived in Dallas too recently to qualify for the company's mandatory summer vacation. And so, while his colleagues left for 2 weeks, Kilby found himself alone in the laboratory with nothing but time and an idea. On September 12, 1958, when the staff returned, he showed them what he had built. A rough-looking patchwork of germanium, gold wire, and aluminum, containing a transistor, a capacitor, and 3 resistors on a single piece of semiconductor. It looked, by one later description, like a failed art project. It worked. T.I. filed for the patent in February 1959 and debuted the device at the Institute of Radio Engineers convention that March. Only one company in the audience understood what they were looking at: Fairchild Semiconductor, where Robert Noyce had been working on the same problem independently. Noyce filed his own patent for a silicon-based integrated circuit in July 1959. A decade of legal battles followed, ending in shared credit and joint patent agreements. Kilby and Noyce are both recognized as co-inventors of the integrated circuit, but it was Kilby, alone in a Dallas lab, during a forced vacation, who soldered the first one together. He would receive the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2000, and when he accepted it, he said publicly that Robert Noyce, who had died in 1990, would have shared the prize had he lived. Only 6 of Kilby's original prototypes survive. One of them sits in the Smithsonian. Cold War defense contracts funded T.I.'s semiconductor research through the late 50s and 60s. The company built airborne radar, missile guidance systems, and laser-guided munitions. Military revenue was the engine underneath the invention. Then Patrick Haggerty, restless as ever, turned to Jack Kilby again. He wanted a consumer product that would use integrated circuits the way the Regency radio had used transistors. Kilby and 2 engineers, whose names rarely appear in the popular histories, Jerry Merriman and Jim Van Tassel, settled on a miniature electronic calculator. The project was codenamed Cal-Tech. By 1967, they had a working prototype, and in 1972, T.I. released the TI-2500 Datamath to the public. 4 years later, the TI-30 hit shelves at $24.95 and became the best-selling calculator in history. It wrote "error" on its display, in a way that an entire generation of American students would remember for the rest of their lives. Then came the product that made Texas Instruments a household name in a way no semiconductor ever could. In November 1976, an engineer named Paul Breedlove was given a budget of $25,000 and 3 months to determine whether a chip could be made to talk. Working alongside Gene France and Richard Wiggins, Breedlove's team developed a TMC-02280, the first single-chip speech synthesizer. The voice was recorded by a Dallas radio announcer named Mitch Carr, chosen for his clear, flat delivery. The team built the speak and spell around it, a bright orange plastic toy with a keyboard, a vocabulary of several hundred words, and a robotic voice that praised correct answers and patiently encouraged wrong ones. Texas Instruments described it as the first time the human vocal tract had been electronically duplicated on a single chip of silicon. It debuted at the Consumer Electronics Show in June 1978 and retailed for $50. 4 years later, Steven Spielberg put it in the hands of a stranded alien in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and the Speak and Spell became one of the most recognized electronic devices of the 20th century. In 2009, the IEEE named it a milestone in the history of electrical engineering. The TMC-A0280 chip found its way into Atari arcade cabinets and Chrysler automobiles. But while the world listened to a chip learn to speak in a toy store, TI was quietly entering a market that would nearly kill it. In 1979, the company released the TI-99-4, the first 16-bit home computer, bundled with a color monitor for $1,150. The seed of the company's worst crisis was sitting on a shelf in a beige box, and nobody inside TI could see what was coming. What was coming was Jack Tramiel, the head of Commodore, and he had a long memory. In the mid-1970s, TI had undercut Commodore's calculator business by dropping prices below what Commodore could match, nearly destroying the company. Tramiel responded by acquiring MOS Technology, the chipmaker that produced the 6502 processor, giving Commodore control of its own silicon. When the home computer market exploded in the early 1980s, Tramiel turned the weapon TI had used against him back around. The TI-99-4A launched at $525 in June 1981. Commodore dropped the price of the VIC-20. TI matched it. Commodore matched again. By February 1983, the TI-99-4A was selling for $150. By summer, TI was selling a cheaper beige version for under $100, losing money on every single unit. The factory in Lubbock, Texas was shipping 5,000 computers a day, but shipping out was not the same as selling. You can read TI's decision to fight the price war two ways. One reading is arrogance, the belief that sheer volume would win. The other is structural, because Commodore owned its chip supplier and could always go $1 lower. Both readings are probably true, and honest history holds them at once. The third quarter of 1983 arrived like a verdict. Texas Instruments reported a loss of $330 million, nearly all of it from the home computer. In October 1983, the company announced it would discontinue the TI-99-4A. The remaining inventory was liquidated at $50 a unit, then $20. Thousands of workers were laid off. The company that had invented the integrated circuit, the handheld calculator, and the speech synthesizer chip had nearly bled to death selling home computers at a loss, chasing a market someone else controlled. But Texas Instruments did not die. It did something harder than dying. It retreated to the thing it had always done better than anyone else on Earth: designing and manufacturing the chip itself. The consumer spotlight went dark. The analog semiconductors and embedded processors, the unsexy components buried inside other companies' products, became the entire business. It was not glamorous, it was survival, and then it was dominance of a different kind. Today, a TI-99-4A in working condition still boots up in collectors' living rooms across America. Homebrew programmers still write new software for a machine discontinued more than 40 years ago. Speak and Spell units sell on eBay for $30, and the voice of Mitch Carr still patiently encourages children to try again. TI calculators sit on the desks of virtually every high school math student in the country, a monopoly so quiet it barely registers as one. And Texas Instruments itself, 96 years after Karcher and McDermott started bouncing sound waves off underground rock in Dallas, employs roughly 33,000 people and posts annual revenue near $18 billion. Its market capitalization approaches $280 billion. New semiconductor fabrication plants are rising in Sherman, Texas. The integrated circuit that Jack Kilby soldered together during a lonely summer vacation in 1958 is inside every phone, every car, every hearing aid, every satellite, and every machine that thinks, under every brand name on Earth except the one that invented it. The company that invented the microchip almost bled to death selling home computers for less than it cost to make them. and survived only by retreating to the thing it did better than anyone: the chip itself. In 1954, Gordon Teal reached into his pocket at a conference in Dayton, Ohio, and pulled out the future. 70 years later, Texas Instruments is still carrying it, quietly, in every pocket in the world. If you grew up with a TI calculator on your desk, a Speak and Spell under the Christmas tree, or a TI 99-4A plugged into the family television, drop a comment below. Tell us the model, the year, and whether it still works. The people who use these machines know more about what Texas Instruments built than any earnings report ever will. Subscribe if you want to keep building this archive with us.